For this plenary, which is supporting a loved one in and transitioning from the criminal justice system, we have Anita Fisher, Hal May, and Valerie Hebert. And so Valerie, Hal, and Anita all identify as family members and play vital roles in terms of mental health advocacy in San Diego County and beyond. Anita Fisher retired in 2018 from her position as Director of Education at NAMI San Diego and has now launched an independent consulting business called Fisher Mental Health Consulting. Hal May is the lead family support specialist for NAMI's Next Steps, which is a peer and family support program, recovery oriented, that focuses on whole health at San Diego County Psychiatric Hospital. Valerie Hebert is the program manager for the Children, Youth, and Family Liaison with NAMI San Diego as well. So we are so excited to have some NAMI affiliate representation. Like I mentioned, each of them identify as family members, and they're here to share a little bit more about their stories. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Anita and get one slide up onto the screen so that everyone can also have access to see that. But Anita, if you're ready, you can go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Hi, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, first, I am so thankful for the panel that just ended. I know Mark Gale. I served under him when he was the criminal justice chair for NAMI California, and he still continues to do great work. And I'm honored to serve on Chief Gonzalez Probation Advisory Board here in San Diego. And I've seen firsthand the wonderful work that they're doing. As a board member, I was able to go and visit the juvenile justice halls here to see the work that they're doing to help the younger people. I was able to go on calls when they, with the probation officers to meet, people to see how that they're doing. So I saw it with my own eyes. So I am definitely honored to serve on that board. And then I got to meet Pastor Troy, during the setup of this particular track. And I just see all the wonderful work that he's doing in Los Angeles. So thank you very much. So as we know the statistics, everyone has shown the statistics of how many of our loved ones may end up in the criminal justice system. And so the speakers on this part of the panel, we're going to share our loved ones did end up in the criminal justice system who live with severe and persistent mental illness. And this is about how we supported them. So I'm going to start this my slide. I don't have a lot of slides. This is probably the only one, but all of that clip art sort of represents, what our journey was. Our journey has now 20 years old this year, actually. And I often just think about, what we went through when the system was even a little far less in serving our son. And so, kind of to just introduce my son, he was a normal kid, if you will, a great kid, teenager, graduated high school. He said, I didn't want to go to college. So I said, okay, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. Well, he ended up going into the Army, and he selected to go into the Medic Corps, and then he was assigned to Walter Reed Hospital. And we were just very proud. He was so happy about what he was doing and the work that the career he was starting to build. And then about 2.5 years into that, my son came home one summer for a visit, and he had changed. There was just something wrong, and I noticed he was abusing alcohol very heavily. Could have been other things too, but I knew for sure that it was alcohol. And I said, go back, get some help. You don't want to ruin the career that you're starting, but that didn't happen. And eventually, my son, I got a call one day from his sergeant that my son was in the brig and that he was basically going to be court-martialed out of the military. I started to explain who he was, and they said everything that we saw in the beginning of his, him starting here, we are surprised as well. Well, during that hearing. They flew me back to Washington, D.C. for his hearing. And the psychologist was the first one in the Army to diagnose my son with, they called it schizophrenic form disorder. And it was like, what is that? You know, as a family, I didn't know what that was. Well, to make a long story short, he was sent back home, and that bad conduct discharge means he did not have any benefits. So there was no medical services that were paid for. And he came back home to what? His family. But I didn't understand mental illness at the time. I knew nothing about it. And we proceeded to try to get him, I call it back on track. Okay, you can, get through this. You're a smart guy. But I saw then that something was wrong. And I remembered what that psychologist said. And it took me about 3 years at that time, and I found NAMI. And then I started to understand that my son had an illness. He had a treatable illness, but it seems like the treatment and my son coming together just wasn't happening. What that led to was homelessness, and it led to jail and prison. And so I'm gonna stop here, and I have a short video that my son made a few years ago where he shares his journey with a criminal justice system, living with his particular condition. So I know Brianna has that available.
Yes, thank you, Anita. I'm going to share my screen right now so that I can connect to the audio, because the audio was not connected.
Okay.
So
hello, my name is Pharaoh Degree. I'm 32 years old and I have a co-occurring disorder. My mental health diagnosis is schizophrenia with substance abuse. My journey began 11 years ago when I was a medic in the United States Army. I was stationed in Walter Reed Hospital in Washington, D.C. when I began to have symptoms of what I now know as schizophrenia. I eventually got a bad conduct discharge and was sent back home to San Diego. Upon returning home, I continued to spiral into my addiction. I did not address both issues, so I eventually ended up in county jail. That led to me being homeless for several years and eventually into prison, the CDC system. I was in places such as Donovan several times, Chino, and Salinas Valley, as well as CRC. And Pelican Bay was the last place that I went to. I did receive a lot of treatment in Salinas Valley Psychiatric Program where I became a mentor and went to various groups. Also in Pelican Bay, I was in the PSU, the Psychiatric Segregated Unit, where I had a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and I also attended various groups and got help in my recovery. Upon returning home from there, I had a lot of family support and seeds had been planted, so I became active in NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. I took various trainings for them as well as Recovery Innovations of California. I led and attended NA groups twice a week where I recently took my 2-year sobriety token. I am now certified to be a peer support specialist. I'm a peer-to-peer mentor, and I now work for NAMI as a peer helpline specialist. I just wanted to share my story with you all and tell you that with hope, God, and support, recovery is possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And again, that video was made a while ago, but one of the important things why I wanted to share this video today was that we had to encourage our son during those times when he was in the prison system. A lot of times he ended up not because of the particular crime, but at the beginning of his journey, in homelessness and being arrested, they had very stringent drug sentencing laws. So the jail ended up being prison because he had mandatory sentencing. And because of his mental health condition, he would end up being assigned where they had a mental health bed, which is how, and I thought I was going to pass out on the day when I found out they sent him to Pelican Bay, because we all saw the, that series that was on TV, that the worst of the worst go there. And I remember my first words, I said, my goodness, what did he do? He was arrested for drug charges. But he actually was in the PSU unit. And when he made this video, it was to share with the mental health chiefs in the California Department of Corrections through Mark. I was invited to speak there, and they wanted my son to speak as well, but he was working at that time, so we made the video. And after that, I remember receiving emails from many of those clinicians within the prison system that said, we never get to see recovery. We never get to see what happens to the individual when they leave. So they were so grateful that they got to see that. I said, it reminds us of why we chose our profession as clinicians, and that they're inside of the system, but their whole charge is to help people get better, so that when they are released to the programs like Pastor Troy and Chief Gonzalez talk about upon reentry. And there is a document that we're going to share, and Brianna's going to put it up. I don't know if it's going to go on the WOVA or the HOOVA or on Zoom, but we kind of put our collective tips and ideas together for you to support your loved one when they're in jail and prison. And one of the things, a few things that I want to share here within my time is one, I always, I wrote him even when he wasn't writing back, because sometimes it takes a while for them to be stabilized on their treatment, which may include medication. So those letters were waiting for him whenever he came around. And I remember I would get a letter and say, I was so happy to have all these letters waiting for me. We tried to get ourselves approved for visiting. Sometimes it was out of San Diego, but we went to visit him to keep his spirits up. Also, we didn't talk about or focus on why he was there. We talked about and focused on, hey, you have another opportunity, get through this, make sure that you are working with your treatment providers, make sure that you're taking your medication, because for him that was what helped my son to do well at the time. We would keep the visits light. We would keep the letters light. We talk about the family dog and what he had done, and so that was one part of it. Then as families, I would try to find out who his parole or probation officer was going to be when it was close for time for him to be released. And I would try to call and introduce ourselves and say, he has a supportive family here. He will be coming home here, and we can work together, to help my son to succeed during his parole or probation period. So those are just a few tips that I have, and I know that Hal and Valerie also have some things that they're going to share with you, and then we're going to have time for Q&A. So I'm going to conclude my presentation at this time.
Thank you, Anita, and we'll pass it over to Hal. And Hal, you're muted.
There you go. Good morning, everybody. My name is Hal, and I would like to thank all the panelists for being here today and sharing their stories. My son has lived with a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia and obsessive compulsive disorder for the last 21 years. Our journey began, he's now 40 years old, and our journey began when he was from the age of 19. For 11 of the 14 years between the ages of 22 and 36, my son was involved in the criminal justice system. The last 6 years of his incarceration were at Atascadero State Hospital. He was sent there as a mentally disordered offender. What that means is that once a person has completed his criminal sentencing commitment for his crime in prison, if the state of California feels that you're still a danger to yourself and others, they can reclassify you as an MDO and send you to a state hospital. Once you're at the state hospital, you're there until the completion of your parole, which is normally 3 years. The parole, once parole is completed, the MDO can become a civil commitment. There is no release date, and in theory, a person can stay there the rest of his life. Usually the minimal stay is 10 years, and before being sent to a Atascadero, my son had spent 2 years at Donovan State Prison. He was extremely sick and when he went to Donovan. He did receive some psychiatric care and medication while he was there, but jails and prisons are for punishment, they're not for medical treatment. They do have medical treatment, but they do not have long-term psychiatric care, which is what's needed. In this setting, they are often over-medicated and to ensure compliance within the system. I received a phone call the night before he was to be released and informing us of his reclassification as an MDO. Although I knew that this was possible, it was upsetting to the family that why, after 2 years of incarceration in the state prison, now on the day of his release, that they decided that he needed to go to a Atascadero state prison for more treatment. When I say state hospital, that means that this is still prison guards, barbed wire, and inmates are closely monitored but they do receive a standard of psychiatric care. This is not a particularly nice place. Up to the time my son was sentenced, I, like most men, did not know how to handle this. I pushed off all this onto my wife, and it wasn't, being a man, it wasn't like the fence was broken and the car needed repair. I could do that, but I did not know how to deal with mental health. Mental health is pushed off onto the women of this world, mostly mothers, wives, sisters, and the men of this world do not take their part or do their share of the carrying the load of the burden of mental illness. At the moment that my son was sentenced to prison for the second time, I looked over at my wife and I saw the pain in her face, and I realized that I wasn't carrying my share of the load. The next day, after he was sentenced, I went down to NAMI and started to volunteer and asked them to teach me everything that they can know how to help my son who's living with mental illness. My son is not a criminal. He has a mental illness. Well, after 3 years of volunteering, NAMI started a new program in San Diego County called the Hope Connection at the San Diego County Psychiatric Hospital, and they offered me a job. The Hope Connection program was a success and because of the success, it led to a new program called Next Steps, which deals with both mental health support and drug and alcohol counseling. These programs provided me with the opportunity to work with patients and to learn about mental illness. That was 9 years ago. While my son was at a Tuscadero, I was allowed to participate in his treatment team meetings because he signed a release of information. And because I was actively calling and writing and asking and talking to doctors and social workers and showing my commitment. The treatment team meetings kept me apprised of how he was doing and what was going on, towards his recovery. As much as I was upset with my son being sent to a Tuscadero It turned out to be what was needed for his recovery. My persistence showed that I was committed to his care and recovery. During the 6 years at Atascadero, he received psychiatric care at a cost of $240,000 a year. After the 6 years of stay there, that total became $1.5 million with the psychiatric care that I could not have provided. After 3 years after he served his first 3 years of parole at Atascadero, he was reclassified as under a civil commitment. He was there for another 3 years before he was released. I was told by a social worker that before he was being released that the reason they were releasing him was because he was going to a loving and caring environment. He said that he told us that me and my wife, that they had never experienced anybody with more support and care and interest in their son's care that we showed over the 6 years that he was there. You know, every 2 to 3 months, because we live in San Diego and Atascadero is like 370 miles from our house, we were only able to visit, you know, every couple of months. And one of the saddest points for me was, you know, the joy of being able to see or to visit my son was, but also too, the fact that at Atascadero, there's 1,200 patients. And on visiting day, every time that we had gone up there were no more than 10 families visiting. This is a lost community of people that nobody cares about. And so while working with the criminal justice system can be exhausting, you know, first you begin with the arrest, then jail, public defenders, the district attorney, judges, prisons, guards, medical care, doctors, nurses, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, caseworkers, recreational therapists, and then probation and parole officers. And I'm sure I missed a few. There are bumps and hurdles to overcome all along the way. You have to step out of your comfort zone. The point I want to make is that you have to do whatever you can to save your loved one. Without you, he could be lost to the system forever. I know it can be frustrating, it's infuriating, it's emotional, and it's unfair at times, and at times hopeless. You don't get many answers, you don't get many yes answers along the way, you just get roadblocks. With all this going on, you still have to maintain, you still have a family you have a life to live. You have family member needs, you have work commitments in everyday life. My son spent a total of 11 years in the state and the prison and state hospital system. It would have been easy to give up hope, but thank God I didn't. There is no cure for mental illness yet, but the quality of your life can improve. My son is safe now, living at home with family. Everything is not perfect, but the quality of our life is better, and his also. No one will advocate for your loved one like you will. I know that family commitment makes recovery possible. You can never give up hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hal. That was incredible. Much, much appreciated. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Valerie. And Valerie will be sharing a presentation, so you can go ahead and do that now.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. And welcome to the NAMI California conference. We're so glad that you're here. I'm going to share my screen and tell you a little bit about myself. I realized, let me start it here and we'll play. Can you see it okay?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So my name is Valerie. This is my lived experience story. And I am a mental health warrior. And I want to tell you how I came to the place that I am today. My story started when my older son was young. Technically, I think his issues started at birth because I had a really difficult pregnancy with him, but I'm not really going to go into all of that. But things really started to amp up in our family when my son was about 10 years old. And the picture on the screen is we were at a family vacation, and our two sons in this picture are about 7 and 9 years old. So I didn't know anything about mental health concerns until my older son was about 10, and life became very difficult for him. My son began to fail in school, so I learned how to navigate IEPs, or individual education plans. When my son got into some trouble with the law, I learned how to navigate the juvenile justice system. When he needed residential care and our insurance company denied services, repeatedly denied services, I might add, I learned how to overturn insurance company denials. And I'd like to add that not only did I learn how to overturn insurance company denials and support my son, but the advocacy work that I did for our family not only helped our family and our son, but ultimately helped every single family who was insured with Anthem Blue Cross. That was a really huge win in my book, and it taught me a little bit about what advocacy means when family members step up to try and help their loved ones. When my son made an attempt on his life, I learned about mental illness, and when he became addicted to street drugs, I learned what co-occurring disorders are. When life began to wear down on me, I learned about taking care of myself. And when people reached out to me asking for advice based on our family's trials, I learned how to help others using my lived experience. Finally, when others began to trust me as a mentor, I became a family support partner. And I'd like to just say at this point in my journey, my husband and I were taking the NAMI family to family class, and guess who our teacher was? It was Anita Fisher, who you heard from earlier in this presentation. And you know, I learned so much in that class. It truly was the beginning of finding the support that our family needed to best support our son. But through that family to family class and through my further engagement with NAMI, I learned how to become a community support resource provider. I learned how to use my lived experience to help mentor what other families were going through. And I learned how to be a behavioral health and resiliency coach for families. I don't know what these little lines are on the screen, so I apologize. That's new to me. But I also want to say that it's important to hold hope of continued recovery for those who struggle with mental illness and co-occurring disorders, even though you can go through some of the most trying times for families. My son is an amazing young man. He has a beautiful heart and he is talented beyond measure. We were able to get my son graduated from high school, but it did not erase his tendency to use street drugs. He has mental health concerns, which started as a youth just with anxiety and depression, but his mental health concerns become much more aggravated when he uses street drugs. His drug addiction took our family straight into the national opioid crisis. And my son never thought that any of this would affect him negatively. He thought that it only impacted himself. But when he was sentenced to 4.8 years in state prison and labeled a serious drug offender, I think that's when stuff really hit the fan for him. So I find a lot of personal healing and connection through my work with NAMI, through Al-Anon and NAMI San Diego support groups. But in all of this, drug addiction robs my son and our family of his beautiful and amazing gifts. So during my son's time in prison, he was arrested and he was placed in jail. While he was waiting for sentencing, he actually chose to stay away from drugs because there's a lot of drugs in prison. The guys can get it there too, just the same way they can get it on the outside. But once my son was clean and sober for a few months, his mental health symptoms got much better. When he was evaluated for services after sentencing and he went into reception, he did not qualify for any mental health interceptions because his brain just became much more healthy. So he was able to work a prison job. We never thought that he could work a job. He would hold a job for maybe a couple of weeks and then he'd be let go, or something would happen, he would stop going. But in prison, he chose to get healthy and fit. He experienced 1.5 years of sobriety. When he was sentenced, he ended up at CRC Norco, and they do have the fire camp program there. So he decided he wanted to go into fire camp, and he tried out for it and he failed. And then he decided to try again, and he actually got into the fire camp program. So it was a place where he found a lot of self-confidence. And my husband and I believe that prison saved my son's life, because before his arrest, he was in such bad shape with his drug use and abuse that literally I would come home and I would think that I'd walk into the house and I'd find him dead. So it was very, very scary time for us, but prison gave him a new chance. But we did find there were lots of inconsistencies upon his release. As you know, during this time of COVID, they were trying to they've been letting a lot of people out of prison. My son was a nonviolent offender, and he was doing very well in prison. He does extremely well when he's in programs. Unfortunately, he's been in programs since he was about 15 years old, but that structure does a lot of good for him. Initially, we were told that he was going to come home to the ACP program, which is the Alternative Custody Program, where he would serve the remainder of his 5-month sentence at home, regularly monitored by parole, so we would have support if anything went wrong. Our son was told that he was told a lot of different things, but all of a sudden one day he just was called in and said that he was being released that day. He was also told that CDCR would be providing him a ride from Norco's up in Riverside County, to the parole office in San Diego, where he'd get checked in and then we'd be able to pick him up. But what actually happened is that day that he was released, he couldn't get in touch with us because there were phone issues at the prison. So he used an illegal inmate phone to call us that morning and let us know he was being released. We waited all day long for some kind of phone call or some kind of message, or try to figure out when we could pick him up from the San Diego parole office, but that never happened. So they tried to call me, but my phone, it went straight to voicemail, so I had no idea what the plan was. And then later that day, he was given $200 and driven with several other inmates, released to a bus stop in Upland, California. And the officer dropped them off, said, "We just don't even care what you do." At the bus stop, one of the inmates went into the bathroom and overdosed on heroin. So that was really sort of tragic. And then finally, our son was able to get to a phone, and we made a 5-hour trip starting at 7:30 p.m. to pick up our son in Upland, California. We didn't even know where that was, but we quickly found out. I would just like to say in closing for my segment that the challenges that are happening in our society, combined with youth who might self-medicate due to early mental health issues, and they might choose to self-medicate with street drugs, it presents a huge challenge to our youth. I'm going to stop screen sharing here. But I'd like to also say that the effects of COVID-19 and isolation from family, these things, I'm sorry, am I still screen sharing? No. Okay. Can you, okay, we're good. But the isolation, it's a perfect storm that will continue to affect our young ones. The dangers of drug use in our youth is profound. If my son wouldn't have started using drugs at such an early age, then I'm not really sure that things would have happened the way that they did and unfold the way that they did. The work that I do for NAMI San Diego in the Children, Youth, and Family Liaison means that I really try to let families know how dangerous things like early use for marijuana can cause early onset psychosis, can cause a lot of these things that we've been talking about today, putting this ball in motion. As a parent, I never thought that my son would grow up to go to prison. We had a lot of hopes and dreams for him. But this perfect storm of what we've been talking about is just how it all naturally unfolded. It's so important to try and be that advocate for our youth when they're struggling. I try to work a lot, our whole department does a lot of work with the school system to try and bring those early interventions to youth as soon as they need them, because without that, then they're going to just keep marching down this path and end up in a place like jail or prison, which is not what our youth need. In closing, I would like to say that I do run a couple of family support groups through NAMI San Diego. They're all being held on the Zoom platform right now, so anybody can join us. On the third Wednesday of the month, I lead a family support meeting, and it is very helpful for families. As well, I run with another NAMI, one of my other NAMI cohorts at NAMI San Diego. We run a criminal justice support group on the third Thursday monthly, and you can locate that information by visiting the NAMI San Diego calendar page, and all of those links are listed there. And for anybody who's looking for additional help, it's a way to reach out and find some assistance and direction towards local resources. So we do hope that you can reach out, and hopefully our stories were impactful for you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the three of you. I so appreciated hearing each and every one of your stories, and I know that folks in the chat are also expressing that your stories really resonated with them, that they too are going through something similar, and that this message of hope was really inspiring for them. So just thank you so much for being here, for taking time out of your busy schedules as mental health advocates to be with us and to let people also on the call not feel so alone in their journeys as well. So I also want to thank everyone in the chat who has been communicating with each other, offering each other resources and saying, you know, this is what I've been doing. I think that's very helpful. So definitely continue to utilize the chat box for that reason as well. But I am going to go ahead and start with the Q&A session. So again, just remember to keep them brief and concise, since we do have a lot of folks on the call. Again, we won't be able to get to all of the questions, but as you can see here on the screen, we have each of our presenters' contact information that they were so gracious to share with everyone. And so if you don't get your question answered or feel like you would like to connect with them, as Valerie just mentioned, if you'd like more information, you can go to the NAMI San Diego website, but if it's anything direct, you can definitely reach out to her as well. So we have a question here on the Whova platform, really kind of in regard to conservatorship. So this individual says, I also have a son who was released recently from jail and Patton State Hospital. Do I try for conservatorship? It is costly and I'm not really sure if it does enough. So anyone can go ahead and jump in.
Well, I can say that I actually did go through the conservatorship process, but remember, I did this when my son was younger. I went through probate conservatorship to get him conserved when he turned 18. So probate conservatorship is a little bit different than like LPS conservatorship. And at NAMI, we have this discussion a lot, and it's an important piece. I like to also remind everybody that if your loved one, you want to think hard about the conservatorship piece, because if they're acting out and getting into trouble, and they don't have their rights as an adult, then it's going to fall back on you. So that's an important piece to think about. If you're talking about conservatorship where they're hospitalized and they need a lot of mental health supports, then it can be very, very valuable. In San Diego, we have some people who really specialize in that. And we do at NAMI, we can put you in direct contact with people who can help you navigate through that conservatorship process. Also in San Diego, there is Legal Aid has a conservatorship clinic, and that's a free clinic that people can go to, and they can reach out and get their questions answered. And if you decide to go through the conservatorship process, it's a very lengthy process in terms of paperwork with the court system. So Legal Aid will help you fill out that paperwork if that's what you want to do.
Excellent. Thank you, Valerie. Does anyone want to add to that one?
I was just going to say that at the point in time when my son was on conservatorship, I had wanted it for years, but found it very difficult. As the family, I wanted him on conservatorship so that he could receive the treatment that he needed, but was not aware that he needed the treatment. Well, it finally happened when he was in the crisis hospital. The doctors decided that yes, he needed it. So it wasn't me who had the conservatorship. He was actually under county conservatorship that allowed him to get additional treatment for a longer period of time. So if your loved one happens to be in the hospital, that the crisis hospital, psychiatric hospital, that's a good time to talk with the doctors and social workers about potentially having them placed on a county conservatorship, or what they call the LPS conservatorship.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you for that additional comment, Anita. All right. So we have a question. Hal, I see you unmuted yourself. Did you want to add to that one?
Yes. When you're at the San Diego County Psychiatric Hospital and you come in there as a patient, if you're refusing to take medication and the doctors feel that you need medication in your support, they will do a temporary conservatorship so that they, in essence, they force medication upon you. But that's just a temporary. It's usually a 30-day commitment. So that's a possibility. That's another possibility. They only do that in cases where somebody refuses to take the medication and they feel that they need it in order for the recovery.
Definitely. Great addition. Thank you so much, Hal. All right. So this question is directly for Anita. So this individual says, Anita said she was able to connect before her son was released, and I'd like to know how she did it.
Now, connect, was it with something in particular? Well, maybe they mean when I said I tried to connect with the probation parole. What I would do is when I knew that he would be assigned to someone, so I would call. Now, sometimes he was not assigned quite yet to a particular agent. So I would just keep calling until, not in a worrisome way, but I mean that I would keep finding out until I knew that he was assigned to someone. So I would call either whatever it was he was going to be on, probation or parole. And that is something that people in our document that we put together, we actually describe the difference in the two when someone is on probation and parole. And we also, have some tips on where to call to find out information, even when they're in jail and prison, where you can call to find out information. There's a ombudsman assigned to every prison. So California Department of Corrections prison. So you can call them for information to find out where you call to find out if your loved one. A lot of times I couldn't find out, is he even receiving care? Is he accepting care if he had not signed a release of information? So, but you can provide information to them. So I would still make sure that they received his mental health history. So it's doing a lot of calls and research and advocating, and that's kind of how you find out information. It does take work, as I know both Hal and Valerie can attest to.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Anita. And yes, that individual says thank you in all caps with lots of exclamation points. So I think that was really helpful. And then I did want to mention, since Anita, again, kind of discussed the Word document. So they did attach a document supporting your loved one with lived experience. So this document that Anita was talking about has been shared into the Zoom chat. It cannot be shared onto the Whova chat quite yet, but it will be sent to everyone as a follow-up. So everyone will get the slides, the recordings, and any of the handouts. They will be available during that follow-up. So thank you so much for that. And then I have another question here. I would like to see attorneys, public defenders, specifically trained in mental illness so that they are better prepared to defend their mentally ill clients. Do you think this is viable?
Oh my gosh. Well, I guess we have to brag about San Diego, because we actually have a public defender, an attorney that oversees, it's called the Defense Transition Unit, that's within the public defender's office, and they specifically handle behavioral health cases. And so I guess we are very, very lucky here. So it's definitely viable, and it's working. And I know it's only about 3 or 4 years old. And I know he just recently did a presentation for our NAMI affiliate, where the community could call in. It was a virtual presentation, and both Hal and I were there also as giving our family member experience. But yes, and I had been praying for that for years, so I'm really glad to see that it is. So please, contact your public defender and your DA's office and ask them if they could, start such a unit. Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that you can do is, if you're not in San Diego, because you can also reach out to the public defender's office, unless you're working with a private attorney, but you can find out if any of the public defenders specialize in mental illness. I know in San Diego at NAMI, we had a public defender actually reach out to us saying, this is my specialty. And so I brought her into many community meetings so she could talk about how it needs to be done a little bit differently. And I know that she wanted to try and leave the public defender's office and go and work in a different part of law, but she came back because she said, this is just where my heart and soul is. So I can't believe that other public defender's offices wouldn't have somebody who would want to have that type of focus, because as somebody said in the previous discussion, this touches all of our lives. And if it's not, our son or our child, it's generally somebody in our family. And so if you reach out to the public defender's office, I bet there is somebody there with their heart in the mental health world, and that they would be the one that you could at least reach out to them and ask questions.
Mm-hmm. And I want to just add one more thing to that, because of Mark Gale. There is a document called What to Do When Your Family Member's Arrested, and that was actually crafted by Mark Gale and sent out to all the NAMIs across the state to share on their website. So that gives you information about how you can contact the public defender's office and what you should write in letters and what information you should share to help with your loved one. So that's another great document to access on your local NAMI's website.
Excellent. Yeah, and Mark, if you could actually send that to me, I can go ahead and include it in the follow-up as well.
And I'd like to add that during my son's incarceration at Atascadero, every year he came up for a release hearing. And for the last 3 years of his release hearing, we had a public defender from the San Diego County office, and he was there, and it's also because of his hard work that contributed to my son being released. They do have, I know that they do have public defenders that specialize in this, and by all means, take advantage of that. If you're getting a public defender, ask for somebody that has experience in this, and I know that they do have. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Hal. And to the three of you for your amazing responses. I did respond in the chat to one of the questions, so asking if LA has a similar reentry program. I did recommend, so Pastor Troy Vaughn is the executive director at the Los Angeles Regional Reentry Partnership. And so to the individual who asked that question, you can definitely start there. But I didn't know if anyone else had anything to add. Mark, maybe I see you pop back on video. But just wondering if LA has a similar reentry program, which is what was discussed on the previous panel.
I think he's on mute.
Oh, Mark, you're on mute.
Hi. So I know that the DOORS program, you know, I think if you contact this is more Troy's area than myself. I think if you contact your probation officer or your parole officer, they can show you where the reentry hubs are. So of course, when you enforce the same thing, your probation officer can help you a lot in finding reentry hubs. I know LARP is working with various different organizations, setting up community reentry hubs where people can go, you know, get some peer support, get connected with housing resources, employment, job training, that kind of stuff. So we're growing that in the city, but you know, we need to be better connected. You know, I think there's a lot of room for NAMI to connect with reentry CBOs, and people are doing that kind of work, and they're not always connected as much to NAMI. And you know, they're trying to help somebody coming out of prison and jail, and we're trying to help their families become more effective support system. I think there's a lot of room for a lot of interplay there.
Thank you so much.
And I will send you also NAMI California for the arrested guide, where the inmate medication information forms are under criminal justice resources for NAMI California on your website. They're all listed there for the state, but I will send you the Los Angeles template.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Excellent. Alrighty, well, that wraps up our session. Thank you so much again to Valerie, to Hal, and to Anita for sharing your stories, for being such fierce advocates. I know a lot of folks on the chat were just saying thank you again. They really took a lot away from this based on the comments that we got regarding your inspiring stories and leaving them with a feeling of hope. So thank you so much. Again, hopefully you were able to jot down their emails. You can also access it on the Whova. And yeah, definitely connect with them if you have any further questions, if you felt very inspired and just want to reach out and say a personal thank you as well is always really nice.